Hey there, welcome back to Boardby. So it's been a while. I said that I was going to make a video next week, last time I was here. It didn't work out that way, but here we are. So the thing is, I'm super busy at the moment. I've actually started working on a full assembly programming course, video course. However, it's about the Commodore 64. It's a full course on how to program a Commodore 64 game from scratch. And that's going to be available at udemy.com. It's a paid course, unfortunately. But when that's done, I'm going to make a short announcement here on this channel. But anyway, right now, let's focus on NESmaker. So the thing is, I made the game back in May, actually, mid-May, and I had this whole thing planned. However, this game that I made turned out to be quite complicated, and that was actually one of the things that I wanted to make a video about, how to make a complex game. However, I just had problems turning that into videos. But I thought, let's not waste this game. Let's talk a little about this game. So in this video, I'm going to mainly focus about object collisions in NESmaker, how that works, and especially how that works in this game. So, first of all, let's take a look at the game. So, there we go. So the game is called Rescue Copter, and it's just a tutorial game. I'm not going to release this. Actually, I might post it at on my website. But anyway, the point about this game was to demonstrate different types of object collisions. So let me just show you what the game is all about. So I have control of this helicopter. And as you can see, it's not, whoa, you just started the game and already there was a bug. Okay, never mind. Anyway, this is not, as you can see, a normal Metroidvania game. I can move up and down, and there's a little momentum going here as well. So, and also the helicopter is turning a little bit when I move to the side. And I can drop bowling balls like this. So the point of this game is to save all the hikers. There are a lot of hikers here in the mountains, and it's my job to save those hikers before the alien gets to them, because there obviously was an alien invasion. So the thing is, I can kill the hikers. That's not going to turn out well for me. I can kill monsters, but monsters can also eat the hikers. So let's see here. There we have a few monsters. I'm going to try to... there we got that one. There we got that one. So here's a little hiker down here. Let's try to rescue this guy. I'm going to make him walk over here. So, I got this hiker, and I have one here, one rescued hiker, and 2 killed aliens. So, let's see what happens if an alien collides with a hiker. So there's an alien, unfortunately there's no hiker there. But let me just rescue this guy, and let's go over here. Here we go. So there's a hiker over here, and there's an alien as well. So let's see what happens when the alien collides with the hiker. So as I'm sure you could see, he ate the hiker. We're going to talk about that in just a little while. Let me just rescue this guy first. And the game is over. Actually, the game has 4 different endings. depending on if you save the hikers, if you killed some hikers, or if the alien ate a certain number of hikers and close the game. So let me just show you real quick. So we just saw this ending, which is the good ending, right? All the hikers here are happy, and we can see how many we rescued and how many are dead and how many the monsters ate. But let's see what happens if the aliens eat a certain number of hikers. Then we'll get this ending. And if I lose all my health, then I'll get this ending. And finally, if I'm the responsible one, if I killed all the hikers, then I get this ending. So that's another thing. We have a lot of topics here, and making different endings in your game, that can be done in a lot of different ways. So let's not focus on that right now. Let's focus about what I said just a moment ago, this object collision thing. So how does object collision work in NESmaker? Well, let's take a look. If we open project settings up here, let me maximize it. Let's go to script settings. Let's go all the way down to where it says subroutines here. And there's one here called, let's see, here it is, handle object collisions. There's a file that's called do handle object collisions, platform base. Alright, so select that one and click edit. So this is the main file for handling object collisions. And let me just first give you a bird's view of this code. So a really top level explanation. The thing is, this collision stuff in NESmaker, it's basically a loop. And we are only checking collisions by default for the player object and the player projectile object, at least in this module. By the way, this is the Metrovania module. I'm not entirely sure about other modules, but I guess it's the same. Anyway, if we go down a little bit here to where it says so around line 80, somewhere around there. So this is where we start. And we also check what objects collided with another object. So for example, was it the player object that collided with the monster object? The way we check that is by checking the object flags. But I said that it was a loop. So how does that work? Well, first of all, as you can see, check the object flags to see if this is a player weapon. So that's the first thing that we check here in the collision code. So how do we know that? It's just a bunch of zeros and a 1 here. Well, as I said, we are looking at object flags. So the way that we read object flags in code is by doing it this way. But let's try to make sense out of this. So let me just see if I can put code and NESmaker side by side here. So let's take a look at our player object, for example. So if I go to object details here, and this goes for not just a player object, this is for all objects. So if I go to details right now, you can see that we have something called monster flags here. Monster flags and object flags, that's the same thing. And we start here, first one, that's persistent. That's always checked for the player object. Second one is player, player weapon, and so on. These checkboxes are the object flags. So when we put a 1 here in our code, that's counting from the right. So this first one, this first 0 here, that's the persistent checkbox. The second one here, that's player. The third one, where we have a 1 now, that's player weapon, and so on. So if you want to read these monster flags in code, remember to start counting from the right. So the first one, second one, third one, fourth, and so on. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So in fact, let's check our player projectile here. So in this case, we are checking if this object is a player weapon. Alright, so if it is a player weapon, then it says here branch if not equal is weapon. Then we go here. If it's not a player weapon, then we skip this player weapon code. So I'm not going to go into detail about this and stuff. That's basic assembly stuff, so let's not spend too much time on that kind of stuff right now. But here we go. Right here. This is where the loop starts. So it says here loop object collision. This is the collision loop for the player weapon. So right now, first of all, it does a check if the object is active or not. But when we get a little bit further down here, it says we check another thing. So we have already checked if the active object here is the player weapon. Now if it is, we need to check if it collided with something else. We need to check what kind of object the other object was. And we do that right here. So just almost at the beginning of this object loop, we do a check. And we check flag 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we go back to NESmaker and let's go to a monster here. So let's bring up this guy. And if I go to object details, I'm going to check this flag, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth flag. And like I just said, when dealing with this stuff in code with the binary numbers, we start from the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So load object flags, and 1 in this position means we are checking, is this a monster object? Did the player weapon collide with a monster object? So if it did, then we go down here. Is a monster weapon collision? So is it a collision between a player weapon and a monster? If it's not, then we skip this thing. So that's the first thing that we check in the collision code here. So I'm not going to go super into detail about this stuff because there's actually a lot of stuff going on in here. I just want to give you a brief explanation about how object collisions work. So in our loop here, the loop for the player projectile, we check if it's a collision with the monster object, and if it is, we go into here and just notice this thing right here. It says jump to subroutine, do handle hurt monster. So that script we know pretty well. Do handle hurt monster, we have looked at that many times before. It's this script that we have, let's see if I can find it here under common. Handle hurt monster, handle monster hurt. So this script is triggered if there's a collision between a player projectile and a monster object. And that makes sense, of course. So if you shoot a monster, then we run the hurt monster code. So pretty obvious actually, but it's nice to know where you can find it. So if you didn't want to run the hurt monster code when the player projectile hit the monster for whatever reason, you could just comment out this thing, right? But I think it makes sense to keep it that way. What happens right after that is we're loading X with self object. Now, I didn't mention this, but way here at the beginning, we store whatever object is active in the code right now. We store that, you know, it's always in the X, right? So whatever object is active right now is what we have loaded into X. And we store that into something called self object. That's a variable. So we store the active object in self object. So by the time we get down here, we have checked if there was a collision between the player projectile and the monster object. And we have run the handle monster hurt code. What we do after that is to load X with self object. So the reason we do that is because we're loading X with a lot of stuff in here. So storing X into this variable self object helps us keep track so that we don't lose the whatever object is in X. So by the time we get down here, we need to load that back into X, the active object. And when we load the active object into X, remember the active object in this case is the player projectile. What do we do with that? Well, we destroy object. So it means that the projectile player weapon collides with the monster. We run the monster hurt code, and then we destroy the player weapon. So if you want the player weapon to just go straight through the monster, then you could comment out these two. But I'm not going to do that. I think this makes sense. So the first one here, as I said, we're checking if the player weapon collides with a monster. The second one here is did the player projectile collide with a pickup object? Now this one is not default in NESmaker. This is something I added myself. So why did I do that? Well, let's go back to the game. Now I know there's a lot of stuff in this video and I'm talking about a lot of stuff, so I'm hoping that you can keep up with everything because I have so much to talk about. But anyway, the reason I'm going to check if a player weapon collides with a pickup object is because our little hiker guy right here, our little hiker guy is actually a pickup object. So this little guy walking back and forth, he's a pickup object. So pickup objects don't have to be static objects just lying there ready to be picked up. They can actually move around like any other object. So this guy's walking back and forth, and what's the player weapon if you remember from the game, I could drop bowling balls. So if the bowling ball collides with this guy, then he's splat. He goes splat. So let's see if we can find it here. So he just goes splat. So that's why I wanted to add another collision that's not in here by default. So the way I did that was just by copying this thing, this check for the collision between the player weapon and the monster. So I copied that, pasted it just below where it says not a monster weapon collision, because the monster weapon collision, that's this part right here. So from just below where it says plus is active, this part right here is just checking or handling the collision between the player weapon and a monster. So if I want to have a collision between the player weapon and a pickup object, I just copy that, modify the code, of course. So first of all, I need to change this, what object flag to check. And as you can see here, I'm checking the, let's see, it's the 6th flag from the right. So again, the 6th flag from the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's this one. So I'm checking, is the player weapon colliding with the pickup object? If it is, go here, and in this case I just change the action step of the pickup object. So I make him go splat, and I play a sound effect. And also I'm increasing a variable called my hiker's dead. So if that reaches a certain number, then it's game over. Alright, but let's continue with the object collision itself. So by default, NESmaker only checks if the player weapon collides with a monster. So this one is a collision with the pickup object, is something I added myself. But that's all there is to the player weapon collision. And the next big one here, that's the player collision code. So again, we need to check the object flags. 1, 2. So the first one is persistent, the second one is the player flag. So I need to check this flag to see if it's a player. And in code, that's this one. So, but this is default NESmaker stuff. So as I said, NESmaker checks collisions for the player weapon and the player object. And the reason we don't check collisions for everything, between everything, is because this whole thing is pretty taxing on the CPU. So if we checked collisions for everything against everything, then it would slow down our game tremendously. We would get a huge amount of slowdown. So in order to make our code as fast as possible and still make sense, we check collisions for player weapon and player object. And here we have collision for the player. So what collisions do we check for the player? Well, if we go down here, let's see here, we have something right here. So again, we're checking if it collides with itself. That's not interesting. We don't want to check if an object collided with itself. But right here, we are checking the player collided with a monster. Again, we're using object flags. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth flag from the right. And again, just to avoid any confusion, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth flag is this monster checkbox. And again, this is default NESmaker stuff. So here we check if the player object collides with a monster. And this is from the player's side, right? So this time the player is the active object. And he's colliding with a monster. So if we think about what that means, it probably means that we want to hurt the player. And that's exactly what happens here in the code. If the player collides with a monster object, then we continue down here and we run the do handle hurt player code. Now again, this is something that we have looked at before. So if we go to project settings, script settings, and we go down to where it says common here. This one, handle player hurt. So this code is run when the player collides with a monster. Now, obviously you probably know this already, but this just pinpoints where that happens exactly in the code. So we run that script when the player object collides with a monster object. Yeah, all right. Do we need to check any other collisions for the player object? Well, yeah. This is also default NESmaker stuff. We need to check if the player collided with a pickup object, right? He needs to be able to pick up stuff. So if a player collides with a pickup object, that's where we check that right here. And that's object flag 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we just did a check a few moments ago. But just to repeat what we did, this is the pickup object. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, we are checking the sixth flag from the right. And that's the pickup object. So the player collides with a pickup object and we run this code in here. First of all, the object is destroyed. And again, that makes sense. If you have, let's say, a diamond in your game, and you're walking around, towards it, colliding with it, and the object goes away. The diamond goes away because you pick it up. So the way that's done here is to destroy the object. So we destroy the pickup object. Alright, so here it says include SCR pickup scripts. So let's see. That's actually the one that we have here under game. Pickup script, this one. So if we take a look at that one, this is the code that's run right here. Now I'm not quite sure why it was made this way. When we write include here and this script define, it means that we're pasting all of the code here in the pickup script. In this case, we're pasting all this code into here. So it's a little different from the other collisions, but pretty much works the same way. So we collide with an object and this pickup code is run. Yeah. Alright, but what if it's not a player power-up collision? Do we need to check any other collisions? Well, NESmaker is set up with one more collision, and that's the collision between the player and an NPC. An NPC, that's the last flag here. So the last one to the left, the 8th flag. And let me just show you real quick. Object details, as you can see, the final flag down here is the NPC flag. So in the collision code, we check if the player object collided with an NPC, and then this code is run. So that's basically it for player weapon collision and player collision. But I did something more. I added something more in this game. I added a collision routine for monster objects. So in my game, I'm checking collisions for the player weapon, for the player object, and for monster object, which means that in my game, I check collisions between monster objects and pickup objects. So when the alien monster collided with this little hiker, the alien monster, that's a monster object. The hiker, that's a pickup object. So when the alien or the monster collides with this little pickup object, then I run this code in here, because I check here's the collision between my monster object and the pickup object. And as you can see here, what happens? Well, I increase my variable my hiker's dead, and I check if it's a certain value and if it's game over or not. And I also let's see here. I also changed the action step for my alien, so that he goes into this eating state. And for the hiker object, the pickup object, that's just destroyed. So here's the monster, here's the hiker, they collide, the hiker object is just destroyed, and the alien object goes into this eating state, this eating action step here. And I also play a sound effect, SFX eat, something I made in Family Tracker. So yeah, that's basically it for this episode. So I know that there was a lot of stuff in here, and I probably explained it maybe a little too fast. I don't know. But anyway, the point of this video was to show you how you can modify the object collision code in NESmaker if you need some kind of custom collision in your game. Like for example in my game here, the monster object and the pickup object has its own code here. There's a check for a collision between those two. So maybe if I'll get the time, I'll try to post a tutorial on the NESmaker forum, but I can't promise anything. But anyway, that's the basics of this game. I'll do my best to try to make another video about this game, but I can't promise anything. But at least you got a quick explanation about object collisions in NESmaker. So that's it for this time, and I will see you again. Bye bye.